This podcast is brought to you by the Center for Christian Music Studies at Baylor University. This podcast was recorded at the 2014 Alleluia Conference. For more information about Alleluia, visit us online at www.baylor.edu/alleluia.
Michael Hahn, professor of sacred music and director of the Master of Sacred Music program at Perkins School of Theology at SMU, conducted a multi-year study on the influences on congregational song of the church since Vatican II. And some of you may be familiar with this study. It's been out for a few years now. But here's how Dr. Hahn speaks of what he calls streams of song. And then I'll tell you why I bring this up. He says, I have chosen streams of song as the overarching organizational metaphor. Streams have a source, and each of the proposed 7 streams of song come from particular sources of faith, a particular expression of piety. Streams come in various widths and depths. Not all streams are the same. Some of the song streams are rushing and seem to be overflowing their banks because of the musical outpouring being generated from their particular piety source. Others are steady in their flow, and yet others may be either drying up or merging with other streams. Streams meander. They do not flow in straight lines like canals. They occasionally crisscross each other. Such is the case with many songs in this overview. Some songs fit comfortably in 2 or more streams. And I'm happy to point out that article. You can find it online in its entirety, and you can read more about it. But the reason I mention it is because I've used his study not just to challenge and shape my choices of congregational song and worship, but have expanded it and applied it to what we do with choral music repertoire as well. It's, I think, a very helpful lens through which to view our musical offerings in worship, whether it be choral or congregational song. And sometimes it just makes more sense for some of the streams to be represented by the choir instead or in addition to the congregational songs. So you see the 7 streams that he lists right here. And if you're thinking there's something missing, where is one particular? If you look further at his study, you will see how it fits into one of these larger 7 streams. And you can automatically begin to see how some of the streams are obviously at this point in time today larger, deeper, flowing streams than others, and some that are beginning to dry up. I know we all tend to favor particular styles of music, and if viewing the music in these streams doesn't work for you, that's fine. I just challenge you to find another helpful way of keeping your mind open to all of the influences on church music today, and being brave to include some in styles that are most uncomfortable and foreign to us. It's just a way of reminding us that the world of music is bigger. The world of church music is larger and broader than ever these days, because we have so many world influences that we have not had, and being uncomfortable with those is not an excuse for not using those. And many times our youth choir is a great tool, vessel through which some of this music can flow. With youth choirs, I'm often asked if I feel it's my responsibility to include contemporary Christian song or praise and worship music in what we do in our choir's repertoire. And the answer for us at St. Andrew is mostly no, but that's only because we have outlets for those particular streams, genres of music outside of youth choir, whether it be praise band or whether it be a small ensemble, whether it be the music in the contemporary services. But what I do like to do is try to find settings by composers like Getty and Townend, of hymns that are written and then maybe arranged by composers like Dan Forrest, who's done taken several of their hymns and created beautiful choral settings of them. People hear them. To the people's ear, they relate that to contemporary Christian music or to praise and worship music But the melodies tend to have, they're easily sung. Their hymns are, Getty hymns are, and also the texts are always, the texts always have integrity. At St. Andrew, the word tried also means a healthy balance of how often the youth choir sings in worship. And for my first 5 years at St. Andrew, the youth choir sang every Sunday. And then we moved into a large 1,600-seat sanctuary, and we just found that the youth choir sound didn't support the congregational song as well as the adult choir sound did. Adult choir is much larger, and so we made some changes, and today we sing on average twice a month. And I hope a lot of you are in situations where your youth choirs, how many of you have youth choirs singing every Sunday? Wow. So see, I think if we'd asked that 10 years ago, 5 or 10 years ago, the answer would have been many more of us. I loved it when we did it. And I think our morale suffered when we stopped singing every Sunday. None of the kids now remember those days. It's been 10 years. But we had a sense of purpose, I think, that we don't have now. When there is that discipline and consistency of meeting week to week. And I would love to be actually in that situation again. There's just a great value in the habit of singing every week. Through the years, we've adjusted the length of our rehearsals. Currently, we're at 90 minutes. Is that about where most of you are, or shorter? Or how many of you rehearse for an hour? How many longer than an hour? Okay. And then for those of you who rehearse longer than an hour, is that including some prayer times or anything else or special things? That's you get more than an hour of rehearsal. That's great. That's great. We tend to spend about 10 minutes, just so you know, we spend 10 minutes in stretches. We massage every time we meet. We do a short period of time with vocal warm-ups. And then on the back end, we've always done joys and concerns. Always share joys and concerns because Methodists just do that. We just do that every time we meet. But we changed that up a little bit this past year, and I really was just kind of convicted to do a little something more with that time. Actually, it came out of this. Our UMYF group started meeting on Wednesdays instead of Sundays, and now they're about to move back to Sundays. But I was thinking then, I have them, I'm the only one meeting with them, with those youth on Sunday nights. So I wanted some kind of devotional component to be a part of our time together. So tried to get really creative, which means I just borrowed a lot of ideas from people who had where this works really well. Mark Acker, a good friend of mine, has included in some of his writings some of these ideas for prayer times. But I'll give you an example or two that have been very meaningful. Last fall, in one of our first rehearsals back, having come off of tour just 2 or 3 months earlier, we used that time to reflect on tour and specifically I brought back several stories that were meaningful from that tour, and then we had cards for each of the churches that we sang for, because how often do you go back, and reconnect in communication, so we did that with those churches, and I think it was very well received by them to get cards. All the kids signed and wrote notes to, and some personal notes about personal experiences that happened there. One of the other times I had some poster board with each poster board had one word written on them. One might have been the word hope, maybe the word peace, maybe forgiveness. So think, you get the idea. Spread them out. I always do the prayer times in a different space from where we rehearse. So if we were rehearsing in the choir room, I either take them to the chapel or to the sanctuary for the prayer time, just to change and the lighting is dim, and we always, if we're in the sanctuary, have the candles on the altar lit, just to create a little bit different environment that's more conducive to prayer. We that night put these boards across the sanctuary before the kids came in, just in different places in the room. They saw these boards, and all their instruction was simply, when you walk in, you'll see these words on different poster boards. Find your way in silence to the word that you seem to be needing a little more of a dose of tonight, today, or this week. And if they ask questions, what do you mean? One kid says, do you want, so that means more forgiveness, like for me, or that I might need to forgive someone else? I said, yes. And just let them kind of dictate how that goes and spend some time there. And they just, from that point, they left. There was no closing prayer or something. But it doesn't take, you guys, for every one I can think of creatively, you can think of 10. But I'll just tell you that they've become really, I find myself, before I plan my minute-by-minute detailed rehearsal, I'm more likely to be planning my devotional time or the prayer time at the end now. It's become that important, and I'm hearing lots of comments from kids who speak to parents about these things. So, if we're going to talk about tried and true, then of course we've got to talk about anthem repertoire that's proven. And here's some that are definitely in my top 20, and you probably recognize every single one of them. Somebody could wake me up from my deepest sleep, and I could name all of those very quickly for you, and I'm sure that you can do the same. And actually this morning in the session we started to pass around a list, and I promised on Baylor's behalf that I would tidy up the list once I get home, and then send it back to you guys and ask that you post it on the website. And Jacob said you would. So can I just pass this around, continuing that list? And if there's anything you wish to add to it, don't worry about if it has already been listed or not. But if we're going to gather with this many of us doing the same thing, it's a great opportunity for people to just list one or two of your favorite anthems.
You'll include these too?
Yes, I'll make sure that mine are on there as well. Absolutely. So if you don't mind, you can just pass that around. Not long ago, talking about, you can, I guess, just leave that up there for a minute. Maybe they will write that. But not long ago, I posted a question on Facebook, asking friends that I work with that work with youth choirs what they thought would be helpful in sessions like this. And the most frequent answer was ideas for recruitment. And that turned out to be one of the topics that I felt least prepared to speak to. And I got a lot of recruitment tools in my belt for adult choir, but I've found it much more challenging to identify the ones that are successful for youth choir because they're quite different. And I will say that I fully believe that by far the two most successful ways are by, of course, word of mouth, and also by exposure of the choir in different venues from time to time outside of worship. Excuse me. For example, our youth department hosts a youth and parent summit each semester during the main Sunday school hour, and that's where all the parents and the kids come to find out what they need to know as for the next semester for youth ministry. And we've always made sure that we've had a table there where the youth choir is represented, and we have the most charismatic youth choir members working the table, and there's always a simple sign-up sheet for folks to indicate an interest, and a distribution of these invitation cards. And I think I have maybe an example, Dylan, of the card that we put out. So take a picture of something recent, and it just has general information about when the choir meets and that kind of thing, and who to contact if they want more information. Then our February fundraiser shows when the youth are singing Broadway songs and just some fun love songs. Those are really, that's a great recruiting tool, because singers know that the friends they invite to be a part of the show rehearsals that start in January typically remain in the choir throughout the semester, and they end up going on tour with us in the summer. And the singers also sell a lot of tickets to their non-St. Andrew friends from school who witness these shows, and they end up joining the choir many times when their families are attending other churches. We had a discussion at lunch about where do you talking about the pools from which we're looking to recruit our singers for youth choir, and I've found that I don't really depend on necessarily or look first to the kids that are in the youth that are involved in our youth ministry program, because I've learned that is one place that we can go to for recruitment, but it's just one of many. We tend to get kids from school choirs in little clusters. One or two from a particular high school choir will come, and then they'll be talking to their friends at choir at school about that, and then I'll end up with 2 or 3 more kids from that particular school, and that's how we end up getting people into the church via the choir. And I don't know if you've noticed this in your churches or not, but interestingly, in the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years, I've noticed that parents, even when the kids, used to be that anytime the youth choir sang, you could guarantee the parents would be there on those Sundays in worship. We're finding that that's not the case anymore. The youth sing, but fewer than half of their parents are actually in the service. They may be attending another worship service, or they may be altogether not there. They drop them off and leave and come back. Do you guys find that is changing at all in your settings, or is it still pretty consistent that the parents would be there?
Especially once the kids start driving.
Yeah, saying that then parents are less likely to be there at that point. Yeah, it's just a trend I've noticed, and I see it reflected in attendance, worship attendance numbers, because I used to could count on exactly, if I had 30 kids singing on a Sunday morning, I could count on probably 50 or so parents being there, or family members of choir parents. Now it's more like 15 or so, maybe, for when I have 30 kids singing. So, yeah, that's just a little different these days. Of course, we use the traditional outlets to advertise a choir, especially from late August until mid-September. We use church-wide email, youth ministry email, Facebook, worship bulletin announcements, Sunday school announcements. So if you have ideas, other recruitment ideas that have really worked, I would love personally to hear from you. And again, maybe those are things that we can share with the group via the website. I want to ask you a question, and the question is this: how is your youth choir program retaining integrity as it evolves to meet the changing needs and demands of churches? And I guess I'm talking mostly about church leadership. Are you finding yourself defending what you know is a thing of great worth when others don't seem to recognize that as much these days? I think, we have a tremendous support at St. Andrew from on all levels, from the people up through the staff. But I find even there in that kind of situation that youth choir can get lost. Where there was a day when anything that the youth did was going to be getting the attention that it needed to get. But as the church has grown larger, and then as I think times have changed, it is even difficult for youth ministry events, choir events to get the attention church-wide that they once did. So I don't think we can assume that anymore. We have to work very hard to find ways to keep them at the forefront of what we do, not just singing and worship either. I think one of the issues is that the definition of church music ministry is changing. For those of us who grew up in a traditional church model, then we always define church music ministry by the music that is being sung and presented in worship from week to week, but also what goes on in our rehearsals, in our choir rooms on Wednesdays and Sundays, and in our bell rehearsals and our orchestra rehearsals. And The model, the church model that is not the traditional church model, I think defines, if they heard the word church music ministry, I think now it's more of more related directly just to the music that is presented to people in worship and how people are ministered to in that regard. Is that a fair statement? So it changed because a lot of the churches that were built on non-traditional models don't have a church music ministry. You know, there are no handbells, there are no children's choirs, no youth choirs, no orchestras, no organized anything like that. It tends to be driven by mostly a smaller team of musicians, oftentimes paid, and that is a music ministry in itself, but it's small, much smaller and compact. So I think we even can't use the same terminology and expect it to be heard in the same way that maybe it was, when we were growing up. That sounds like, man, I always heard people say things like that. Back in my day. Back in my day. I had a conversation with Don Newen once, and Don was never afraid to tell you what he believes. And but he told my choir this, actually. He said, and I will remember it because it resonated with me, and I agree. I think the church, looking back, and you don't have to agree with this at all, but I think some of you will. Looking back, I grew up in a Baptist background, but I also had my foot in the Methodist door as well. And I think church choirs basically had their heydays when churches had their heydays, which was back in the 50s and 60s, even maybe into the 70s, and then in the 80s and 90s when we started to see influences of different song influences. I think that we being the choir directors probably are the ones, if there is blame to be cast, we're the ones to cast the blames on when we just continued to let our choirs do what they had always done. Don said, if that was the case and we just were going through the motions and we trusted the choirs were going to be something that were always going to be there, then it was bound to happen that something else, some other influence, some other musical influence was going to come in and fill that void where there was a new freshness and a new excitement. And that is those were the days when youth choirs began to dwindle, and adult choirs even began to be, in some cases, replaced by other types of music in the church. And that wasn't the right answer. But I think, looking back on it, so many of us, there was that period of time where we were so defensive, but the problem was us all along instead of anything else. And so I think we're kind of in a renaissance now, but it's a renaissance brought on by necessity. We're just trying to save what is, in some cases, hanging on by a thread. But it has caused, and I love the fact, and nobody's doing this better than Baylor University with the church music program here. When students who are sitting across the room from each other, a student who grew up in a church that never had a choir, never had a graded choir program, and it has never known anything any different from the praise team and the band that led worship in their church all their years of growing up, sitting across from someone who was playing the organ in an Episcopal parish when she was in the 9th grade, through 12th grade, and went through a graded choir program, whatever. These students are, they're sitting there talking for 4 years. They're dialoguing with each other, learning about each other's background and history, and then they come out of this as we see. And I have the privilege of sitting on a board here at Baylor where we see these students every year and how they respect one another. And there's no question about the things that we've struggled with, some of us have struggled with and couldn't really talk about or didn't know how to have the conversations. We tend to start, these students, for me personally, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about how to dialogue or how to just say, well, it's just silly, that was even an issue to begin with. If I had just learned a little bit more about this particular thing or that particular thing, then at least I could have those conversations. So I think, I just say all that because I believe the only way that renaissance is going to happen with youth choirs is that we get down in the trenches with our worship leaders, with our praise band and team leaders, and people that are just as threatened at times by what we do as we by what they do. I hate to even use that word because it's not a threat anymore, but I guess it still is for a lot of people. But there's a great synergy that can come from that when we can work together and we can draw on ideas. We have a great worship leader at our church. His name is Micah Peacock. And if I'm going to introduce a song, if I say to Micah, going back to the streams of song, if there's a particular praise and worship song, or if I'm looking for a praise and worship song or contemporary Christian song that I want to find a good setting of, the first person I go to is Micah, because I say I want to know what's out there, what's popular right now, what's working, what has some real spiritual meat to it, and then chances are those are the very songs that are being set by the Dan Forrest of the world right now, or other composers who are doing, Craig Courtney, who are doing settings of those kinds of things. So, amazing when you think to reach out and then on the flip side of that, come Christmas this year, I will get a call from Micah. And he will be saying, I'm trying to put a small choir together for a Christmas Eve service. And help me name some folks that that sing, but are not going to be singing with you that night. And so it's a really good partnership. And I'm thankful that the students that come out of schools like here are not even thinking twice about having those conversations. They've already got it figured out. Looking on to the true, we went through, that's the tried section. The true section we'll define as by taking a closer look at ourselves and being true to who we are and to our students, considering our calling. And I'm reminded of the scripture from Philippians 4, verse 8. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. I went to St. Andrew as a 25-year-old fresh out of grad school here at Baylor, and I had two primary jobs. One, and my title was Associate Minister of Music. I was to direct the youth choir, and I was to lead and plan contemporary worship. Neither were aspirations of mine at the time, but I saw an opportunity at St. Andrew, and I took it, and it paid off. And then 6 months later, because of some other things that were going on, I was asked to be Minister of Music and of what was then a 3,000-member church, and all of a sudden I had multiple adult choirs and overseeing the children's choirs and managing a bigger program budget, leading a staff that were all older than I, and was planning 4 worship services, traditional and contemporary. And I was thrown into executive level staff meetings where I had no business being, and I was having the time of my life. And the fact was that I didn't deserve any of that, but it had to quickly become my new normal. But I will tell you that, I'm saying that to tell you that by far the least comfortable duty of all of those was leading the youth choir. I have always been really comfortable in front of 1,000 people. I have always related well to people my parents' age, my grandparents' age, or even little children, but I was scared to death by teenagers. I was intimidated. Maybe part of that was because I was an older child, the oldest child. I never really felt like I was a teenager, I guess. I skipped that somehow. And so I was very intimidated. So in the first 2 months, the average attendance in the high school choir dropped from 55 to 25. One of the ones who left was the senior pastor's son. But in the midst of that, a transformation was taking place. And I credit my senior pastor for stepping back and giving me a chance. But I was more anxious about those Sunday evenings rehearsals than any other hour of my week. And I think looking back on it, I handled my insecurities by putting up some personal walls and not allowing the youth to really get to know me. And Certainly, I was not about to expose any flaws to them. And I give you this personal background to remind you of what you already know. With all ages of people, but youth in particular, you must be yourself. Not feeling the need or trying to be who you are not just to win them over or to prove your own worth. And it took me 5 or 6 years to learn how to be real with teenagers. They see through pretense very quickly. Respect was a huge part of the process of learning. Youth have no desire to be affiliated with a leader who shows lack of respect to them. Nor do they want to be involved in an organization where peer respect is not on a very high level. And I encourage us all to strive to be fit examples for them, of course, but to be okay with exposing our weaknesses and our failures along the journey, because they will inevitably rise to the task of encouraging us and loving us on a level that adults sometimes cannot. No one ever told me this, but I figured it out. I feel we must have the same expectations of ourselves as directors of youth choirs as we do when dealing with adult choirs, or even university choirs, or professional choirs. And we should have the same level of expectation for the youth choir as we have for all of the other choirs. The pursuit of excellence certainly has a place here. Not perfection by any means, but excellence. Vince Lombardi. You've heard the quote, and I think I have that quote here somewhere. Perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can catch excellence. Amen?
Yeah.
Amen.
And you know, it's more than just an aspiration or a mantra. I think it's our calling as church musicians. I remember there was a day, but no longer, when in the choir room you would hear comments, remember we're just a church choir, you know? Or don't forget we're all volunteer here. I don't hear those anymore, but it's a journey to get there. I've heard, you know, in terms of youth choirs, we create excuses in our own heads, like they'll never be as good as that school choir because we don't have nearly as much rehearsal time. Or it'll be okay if we don't polish this anthem because the church just loves to see youth up there. I'm telling you, as I said a minute ago, those days are changing. I think they still enjoy seeing youth up there, but that doesn't really matter as much as it used to in the bigger picture. We can't count on that. Or how can we possibly require certain things of them? How many times I would love to hold grades over a kid's head, you know? You don't come to these rehearsals, I'm going to drop this grade. I mean, just like school choir directors, they can do this, they can do that. We don't have that right. We don't have that ability. And so sometimes, though, we feel we'll push them away if we ask too much. But I don't think so. My experience with youth choirs is the same as with adult choirs. You get out of it what you put into it. The singers will always rise to the level of expectations you have of them as long as you have done your part to make this possible. People of all ages want to be a part of something that is of highest quality, that doesn't waste their time, and is carried out within an honest and encouraging community. Will this kind of approach to ministry fill your choir lofts to capacity or make you the coolest adult leader ever? Maybe not. But I can't imagine it any other way if I am truly fulfilling the calling that God has placed on my life. And I know that you agree with the same. It just, at times, we need to be reminded of that, and we need to hear it. Lastly, I believe it is good for us to all be reminded that even though we may not be the student's youth minister by title, we often find ourselves in that role. And we need to acknowledge that some students will identify with us on a more personal level than they might with their youth minister. So we can't relinquish that responsibility to minister to them in non-musical ways. And I think along those same lines, we also should be cognizant of our role as a parent at times. My associate, Sarah, her role tends to be more of a trusted friend, and then I'm the teacher, director. But inevitably, there are going to be a few students who identify more with me on that personal level. So you be ready for this and treat it as a privilege, right? And treat it with great care. I want to introduce somebody to you, and he's standing in the back of the room, and his name is Austin Taylor. Austin, thank you for being here today. I have, before we go any further with Austin, I think I have a picture of Austin. I think I still have that photo from worship. Yeah, here's Austin at the 11 o'clock service in the choir loft one Sunday, caught on the camera, asleep during what I hope was the sermon and not anything musical. But this is not typically the Austin that we know. And I called on him. Austin's now a student going to UT this fall. He grew up in our children's choirs, went through our youth choirs, and Austin he is here to speak from a student perspective, and for you to pick his brain in these last 15 minutes or so that we have together. But I want him to talk a little bit about himself and why he believes as he does in youth choir.
Well, hello everyone. How are y'all doing today?
All right.
Chris, I believe these are yours, by the way. I'll let you hold on to that.
you.
It's
Thank
my
you.
turn to talk now. So, I've been waiting years for that. No, my name's Austin Taylor. I'm going to be a sophomore at UT. I just transferred there, actually. I was at UT Arlington this past year. And I grew up at St. Andrew, at the church that Chris so lovingly calls home. My mom was very, very active in the choral program as an adult there and everything, and my dad was really active in the youth program there. And so I sang in children's choir for a long time, since pre-K, coming up and singing. And it became time that I'd go into middle school, and mom was like, "Hey, do you want to do middle school youth choir? You want to go on to Salt and Light?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll give it a shot." First day I show up, I knew no one, but I think that the social anxiety and all the problems that I had growing up through middle school and going on to high school and everything, there's a lot of change that happens in all that time. There's a lot of weird things that go on in your life, and people change because you grow up. And I think that Chris and the Salt and Light Youth Program was an incredible rock and this foundation in my life for 7 straight years that were middle school all the way through high school, that were really important to my development as a person and development as a Christian too. There's so many lessons that I think Chris taught me in terms of music, in terms of life, in terms of friendships. We talked about recruitment earlier, and I think one of the most important things that I think you can understand about people is that as humans, we want to receive as much as we want to give. And so as a youth in the choir, I felt like I was giving a whole lot of my time, a whole lot of my effort to something, and it was really important to me back then that I received something back, and Chris did that in many different ways. He talked about devotional time and stuff like that. Actually, just playing through the music, I am now a worship leader right now on staff in the youth department at St. Andrew. I lead contemporary style worship, which we talked about the clash and everything, but I don't want to be considered part of the dark side or anything like that. But in my personal view, I see this beautiful blend between the two, but that's just my opinion. But one of the reasons I was really inspired to do that, inspired to continue to grow as a musician and as a Christian, was because of Chris and the choir. And I really found this place and this place of joy and uniqueness in choral music and in music in general, and what we can do for God. The story that I always go back to is my first choir tour, going in 7th grade, between 6th and 7th grade. We were going to Atlanta, was the tour destination, and we stopped along the way. And one of the stops was in this town called Marietta, Georgia, just north of Atlanta. And the day we were going to show up for the concert and everything, it might have been the day before actually, but we get a call, and one of the church administrators there had been killed. And it was an absolute tragedy. The church was, just scrambling to deal with this incredible loss. And Chris goes, "Hey, we can stay in a hotel. Don't worry about it. We can cancel the concert. It's okay. You don't have to have host homes, anything like that. We'll figure it out." And they said, "No, she would have wanted you to be there." And so we went and we did the concert. And the church administrator's daughter sat in the very front row.
Had just traveled on a choir tour the week before as a chaperone, of their tour.
It was it was incredibly powerful just that the family was there. But we sang, I remember our last song for that concert, it was this song called We Are Bound for Greater Things. I don't know if y'all have heard it before. But Chris had this powerful way of doing it where we started sitting and we sang the song, and as we were singing, more and more people stood up. And by the end, it was just waterworks everywhere. It was incredibly powerful. But what I learned, even as a little, 6th, 7th grader, middle schooler, was that the stuff that we're singing, the stuff that we're performing, it has meaning. And you never know what someone's going to take from that in the context that you're singing. Everyone has their own lives. Everyone's fighting a battle you know nothing about. And something that you sing, one note, one word, they might latch onto and be needing that day. And so that was a lesson that really carried with me through a lot of the extra struggles I had and everything. One of the other struggles I had was puberty, which was very fun. I'm glad it's over with for the most part. So I'm hoping I can squeeze out a couple more inches. My goal is to reach 6 feet, hopefully. Fingers crossed, everyone. But I struggled with the fact that I was a soprano and alto in like 8th grade after all my friends had moved on to being tenors and basses, and that was frustrating for me. Even more frustrating was when I was stuck at tenor and could not be a bass to save my life until my senior year of high school. Oh gosh, I gave Chris such a hard time. I was not the easiest person to deal with. I remember one time he was, I must have been a sophomore, junior in high school. We were singing this one piece, rehearsing it, and Chris was just railing on the tenors. Come on, I need more volume. Where are you? And everything. And I was so fed up because the tenor section was me as a high schooler, and then 3 7th grade boys, and that's it. And they had nothing. They had no volume, no confidence. I was out there screaming, just trying to give something compared to the 30, 40 girls in the choir. And Chris had to have a talk with me after that about, hey, look, here's the deal. I know you're doing all that you can do, and that's all I want you to do is the thing. So I think that Chris handled my voice changing and just all the other struggles that are associated with working with youth really, really well. So my job here is to be a resource for y'all. I've been through the youth group and youth choir and everything like that for many years. I do not want to call myself an expert, but I've seen a lot of youth ministry. So in my 19 years of life. So any questions that y'all have, I'm here to give perspective on and just to answer. So I think for the rest of the time, really, before handing off to Chris, any questions that y'all have? Yes.
What did you see that, maybe y'all didn't have that problem, but what did you have situations where kids left, and what was the reason for that?
I think the biggest thing is that some people were not committed to the choir, and because they weren't committed, they weren't getting the full benefit of what the choir had to offer. I think that people came in just seeing it as not as much what they can do, but like I said, people want to receive more than they want to give. And so people came in expecting to not have to do any work and just kind of be there, and there'd be no expectation, just be kind of a hangout place, which I got to admit, the family of youth choir and the friends I made, I still have to say, my best friends are from youth choir. And that it's a great place to have a community, but when you're not using that community to do something greater for God, then I think it loses its purpose, and I think that's where people kind of went off from there, was that they just kind of said, I don't want to sing. Okay, why are you in the choir? But, I think they were just trying to be fed without giving anything back. So, anything else?
Pick his brain, folks. Pick his brain.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm finding it more and more difficult to communicate. There are so many ways to communicate now. I don't feel like I have time to Facebook message them they don't answer emails. Emails are gone.
No. I don't answer emails. I'm 19.
How do you communicate with these kids?
Well,
Text?
I mean, Chris might be a little bit better at this. A lot of it was actually through my parents, because I didn't run my own schedule. My parents ran my schedule.
The parents don't
Well, that's an entire fault that I think is different, because as someone who's now been involved for the past year or so in youth ministry also, I think parents have changed. I just see this big difference between even when my parents were, raising me and my siblings through the youth group, and what these kids' parents are kind of doing, which it's really disappointing for me to see that change just in parenting and involvement. But I think so much of it has to be youth-led. At some point, it has to be a desire for them to say, oh, we want to go to this, and I think that part that's the community that I was talking about, is that all my friends were like, we're going to go to choir. This is something we're going to be involved with. And so as a group, we said we're going to take charge and be there for everything and take part in everything. And so, I mean, I'd come back after missing a week of youth choir or something like that, or missing a Sunday that we sang, and they'd be, where were you, dude? Come on, what are you doing? We got to be here. This is a ministry. And so I think at a certain point, community building is so important to me, because I think that if they want to and they have desire to, and all their friends are doing it kind of thing, it's like peer pressure. If all your friends are pressuring you to do something good, you're going to do something good. And so I think that's really important. So I think it's you can struggle as much as you want, and I'm sorry you have to struggle so much, but at a certain point, the youth have to take charge, and they have to kind of lead themselves in some ways.
And I would say it's a multi-layered assault, is the way I would say it. When it comes to communication, we lead a multi-layered assault. We everything that I say in an email that goes to the youth, goes in an email to the parents, goes into a text, a group text to the parents and to the youth, goes into a church bulletin, goes into a phone call, and then you just trust that something in there works and the word gets across somehow. But text has been the best way, and people have not been afraid to opt into the texting programs we use to send. What is one of them we use is
MailChimp.
Reminder 101, I think. Reminder 101. Yeah, it's free. Yeah. Yes.
Free app.
It's a free app?
Yes.
It's an app and a website. You can do it both.
I think that if it gets annoying, then keep doing it. That's the thing. Is if they see it as annoying, then you've not gone far enough. It has to be even more. So.
Yeah.
Sure.
And those texts are great because they can't respond to those texts, right? I mean, it's set up where you can't respond to the text that goes out. And we use it on tour. We strip out the parents then on tour, and then we use it to say, remind the kids when they're all on the beach, you got 5 more minutes before you're back over to the hotel or something, you know. And they're everybody. It's funny. We're in the museum, in the Civil Rights Museum on Friday morning last week. And I'm one of the last ones, but there's about 15 kids still in the room with me, and all of a sudden everybody's phone starts dinging, and it's because Sarah is out front saying it's time to get on the bus. Nice. And so everybody all of a sudden quietly starts moving towards the, a little different from back in the day again, but
it's a new era, Chris.
It's a new era. I'm trying to stay right there with you.
I know.
I'm doing my best.
It's okay. I know you're trying. Yes?
I have a question. Were you also simultaneously involved in the youth group at your church at the same time that you were involved in youth choir? And was there a totally different style of music going on in the youth group? And was there like a conflict of interest or anything there for you or for your peers? Like, was it hard for you to get your peers to want to come to the youth choir because it wasn't the style of music that they did in youth group?
The answer is yes, and sort of. So, yes, I was very involved. My dad actually ran the middle school youth group for a long time when there's some staff turnover and stuff like that. And then, yes, we did do, it was all contemporary and modern worship and everything. So a guy stands up a guitar and sings songs from Hillsong and stuff like that, Mighty to Save and all that jazz. And for me, and for a lot of my peers, that was the primary way. It was our first exposure in 6th grade to contemporary worship, because back then we didn't really go to a lot of, there wasn't really a contemporary service that was really established to go to. Way back when I was in 6th grade, all the old days. But yeah, so the answer is sort of, because we connected most with that because that was our biggest exposure to something new and exciting in terms of worship and everything. But after a while, I think everyone looks for something different kind of thing than what they have. And so I think that's where choral music and contemporary worship can have this beautiful synergy with each other, is that they fulfill, they're two different methods of something, of worship that's really important. And so, I mean, I know people that have gone to our contemporary service that we just started back like two and a half years ago, something like that. It's been really successful and everything. People have gone to that and they've loved it. And at this point, they say, well, you know, I mean, it's the same stuff, it feels like, every time. And I feel that's the same thing that people sometimes have this knee-jerk, elastic reaction to traditional worship too, in the sense that it's kind of this back and forth. And so I think there's a median where it can coexist. And so for me, all my contemporary worship needs and everything I wanted to hear from a guitar was played over at the youth group. And then I went to choir practice, and I think the most beautiful part of that was that I participated. And I felt like it was something that I was helping lead worship in the same way. And so for some people, there was an initial wall that they were saying, I don't know if I can do choral stuff. I don't even really sing that well. I like to, but I don't really, I don't feel like I could do it. But pretty much everyone that actually came to rehearsal decided they loved it. I can't really think of anyone that didn't move, and that was the reason for really leaving after we convinced them to come on in the first place. So, that's just out of my friend group and everything. I think that there was a wall, but once they got past it, it was this wonderful, wonderful coexistence. Yes, go ahead.
What are you studying to do?
Oh, in college? I am studying computer science, but we'll see how long that lasts. I'm one of those guys that tend to bounce around and want to do everything. So
Really?
Oh, really? Yes. Thanks, Chris.
But you were so focused.
Anyways, but yes, I'm studying computer science. I figure if I enjoy the task of sitting down and pounding out code, which other people hate, really, really hate doing, bang their head against the wall kind of thing, then I might as well major in it. But we'll see how long that lasts. I just have a lot of interest in everything. I'm actually currently I'm heading down to Austin in August, and I'm looking for places to actually lead worship at and get involved with different, whether it's choral programs. I had some lady named Stacy Curtis talked to me back in January about doing something with her down in Austin, and various other church ministries and stuff like that I want to lead worship at, contemporary style too. So
get him if you're in the Austin area.
Sitting here going, oh,
my gosh,
I live in the wrong place.
Yeah. So
probably drive for money too.
Oh shoot! I don't have a car, but it's okay. I'm planning on getting a moped. It would be great. Old riding style. Actually, one of the questions I got last time was related to the question you asked in terms of was there a clash between youth ministry and youth choir, and that's something that for some reason I never really heard a lot about it, and then I went to this choral guild, something like that meeting, and then all of a sudden, everyone's saying, please help me with my youth pastor, kind of thing. I actually, there's a time when I was in high school sophomore year where the youth group at my church almost straight up died. I'm talking, besides Sunday school where people's parents would force them to come, the actual youth ministry and youth group, there's about 5 kids that showed up in what was usually a 50 member kind of youth group, where 50 people would show up a week kind of thing. And so everyone dropped out. And it was me and like 3 other people that mostly came, and maybe one person would rotate in. And so I think there was a big clash when I was a youth between youth ministry and youth choir, in the sense that people I saw at youth choir did not go to youth group, people I saw at youth group did not go to youth choir for the most part. And it was just 2 separate ministries that were just completely cut off. I think that standing back, and I can't really say too much about this, but I saw a clash between our youth pastor at the time and Chris too, in terms of personality, in terms of the way things wanted to be run for both sides. And it seemed like it was quite the task to kind of handle that situation and everything. But
I told them in the early session, I alluded to some of that and how the situation is totally different now. Because I think because my encouragement was that even in those situations where you get zero support for your little portion of the youth ministry called youth choir from the youth minister himself or herself, it is still possible, as it was at St. Andrew, for the youth choir to flourish in those times. We still had a solid youth choir program even when we didn't have support, but it caused us, to work through that. We created a parent committee, a bridge committee of people made up of whose kids only went to youth group, only went to choir, and went to both. And we had that group because the dialogue was cut off between me and the youth minister. Seemingly couldn't get anything done together. Then the parents were very helpful in that making that dialogue happen. So it wasn't easy, but yeah. But now things are wonderful.
I see a difference personally. It's a big difference. So. Are there any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question with scheduling. You mentioned you were on Wednesdays, you go back to Sundays, you did. We have our youth group usually meets 6:30 to 8 on Wednesdays, and then youth choir has been meeting prior to that, but that has made it difficult for the youth to get there because of school.
It is early.
It's really hard, and then there's adult choir practice too, so we have to kind of balance all that at the same time. It's hard to find a good schedule. Is there usually a good time that works for youth?
Well, here's the problem that I've worked in youth ministry past year, and I've seen the same problems in that it seems to me that high schoolers are the busiest people in the world these days. Oh my gosh! And I was part of it for a while, but at that point I was so ingrained and constantly going that it didn't really affect me too much. I didn't schedule anything around it, but I mean, between club teams, like soccer meets year round, like every single day. I don't even know how they do it, but I think Sundays are probably better for many high schoolers if that's a specific problem. For middle schoolers, I've never really seen a difference just because usually it's their parents driving them, so it's their parents' schedule easy. So,
but even when our youth was meeting on Wednesday, I thought that could hurt us having youth choir on Sundays because they weren't going up there for youth. We actually, in some ways, it never faltered. And at times it felt even better because they weren't being shared, weren't stretching themselves that much over several hours on Sunday. But they were coming on Sunday. We had more than ever involved during that time. So don't be afraid to part from the other youth schedule to another time.
When do your graded children's choir meet?
Right now, Sunday afternoons, 4:30 to 5:30.
Just before the youth choir?
They could meet simultaneously if we needed to, if they needed to. We may be changing that here in the next year or two because that's not working well.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the answer is going to be for our children's choir rehearsals, but 4:30 to 5:30 has been that way for years. Mm-hmm. It's the same issues. Well, not the same issues, but you've got kids playing soccer at age 2, and they never stop.
After rehearsal?
I think we're going to probably go back to some kind of a snack between. So when youth choir gets out, we're going to end a little earlier. Now that they're coming back to Sunday nights, they start at 7. We end at 7, so we're going to end a little earlier, and they're going to start a little later, just to have a little bit of gray area in between. Where I think that Marie said there's going to be some kind of snack for people who've been a youth choir,
Gotcha. Okay.
which is what we did before, and that seemed to work well.
The days of which sandwiches for dinner.
Which sandwiches? Yeah, that was
beautiful.
Great. Yeah.
Fond memories of middle school.
Yeah.
And it was cool. Any other questions? All right. Well,
Let's thank Austin for coming on.